All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about a really simple shift in how we listen, a shift that can unlock some incredibly deep ideas. See, it turns out it's often not about what you're hearing, but how your mind is set up to receive it in the first place. So, have you ever had this happen? You hear an idea, and for one person, it just clicks, it's totally straightforward, but for you, it sounds, I don't know, impossibly abstract, maybe even a little mystical. Well, what's so fascinating is that the problem might not be the teaching at all. It might just be the way we're trying to listen to it. Most of us, without even realizing it, have a default listening mode. When we hear something new, our brain's first instinct is to try and turn it into a story. We listen for a sequence, a timeline. This is called temporal listening. And look, this mode is absolutely essential. It's how we follow instructions, it's how we get lost in a good story, it's how we take advice. It's all about process, cause and effect, how things unfold over time. It's our go-to setting for making sense of pretty much everything. But, and this is the real kicker, what happens when a teaching isn't a timeline? What if it's describing a structure, a set of conditions that all exist at the same time? Well, when we try to force that kind of idea into our default story mode, that's when things get weird. The teaching suddenly sounds confusing, not because it is, but because we're literally trying to unlock it with the wrong key. So what's the solution? Well, it's about learning a new way to orient our minds. We need to learn how to shift from listening for time to listening for structure. And to make this crystal clear, we're going to use a super simple analogy. To really get this, just picture yourself looking at a photograph. Any photograph. Now, there are two fundamentally different kinds of questions you can ask about this single frozen image. On the one hand, you've got the temporal question, the story question. What happened right before this? What happened right after? But on the other hand, you have the structural question. This one has nothing to do with time. It asks, what things had to be in place right here, right now, for this picture to even be possible? And the answer to that is, well, you need light, a camera, something to take a picture of, and a point of view. Now notice, one of these doesn't happen after the other. They aren't steps in a recipe. They are the necessary simultaneous conditions for the photo to exist. That is structural thinking. It's not about what happens next. It's about how is this thing configured right now? Okay, so let's take this new lens and put it to the test with a real-world example that trips a lot of people up. A short Buddhist text called the Kalaka Rama Sutta. This teaching is perfect for us because it just refuses to tell a simple story. The very first thing this text does is lay out the entire field of possible experience. I mean, everything you could possibly see or hear or feel or even think. It isn't pointing to some special state you need to get to later. It's drawing a big circle around everything that is right now. It's a complete snapshot of the whole structure. And then we get to this line, and this is where everything hinges. All this is known, but the Tathagata does not take a stand upon it. Now, this is the exact spot where our old temporal listening habits can really lead us astray. Our story brain immediately wants to turn this into a sequence. It goes, okay, step 1, I know something. And then step 2, I practice not clinging to it later. But that's not what's being said. The teaching is making a structural distinction, not a temporal one. It's separating the act of knowing from the act of taking a stand. These are two different things that can happen in the very same moment. So what on earth is a stand? It's not an opinion or some big belief. It's way simpler. It's a position. It's a mental foothold. It's the mind planting its flag somewhere in the field of experience and saying, I am here and that thing is over there. And this totally reframes that whole idea of clinging. We tend to think of it as this big, dramatic, emotional thing, but here it's just the quiet, subtle act of using an experience as a reference point, using a nice feeling or a cool insight as a place to stand, as a place to be. So here it is, the crucial insight. This teaching is saying that suffering isn't caused by the content of our experience, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the boring stuff. It's caused by the very act of taking a position within it. The problem isn't the landscape. It's where the mind is misplaced within that landscape. And that leads to this incredibly powerful and beautiful summary of the whole goal. It's not about getting rid of experience. It's about knowing without standing. It's about having a full experience without trying to occupy it. Okay, so why does any of this matter? How does this mental shift from temporal to structural actually become a useful tool in our own lives? Well, it completely changes the fundamental question we ask ourselves moment to moment. So instead of our default, future facing question, okay, what should happen next? We start asking a present moment structural question. Right now, where is my mind standing? What am I using as a reference point? This shifts our whole focus from trying to solve a situation to simply noticing our orientation within it. And this brings us right back to where we started. The reason some of these ideas can feel so mysterious is that we're trying to read a blueprint as if it were a novel. They were never about a story of events unfolding over time. They were always about the underlying structure of experience and about where suffering quietly enters the picture through that simple act of taking a position. So the final thought here is a really profound one. Freedom, from this point of view, isn't about experience going away or becoming perfect. Experience can be full. Knowing can be total. The only thing that has to end is the compulsion to plant a flag, the need to stand somewhere inside it all.